So, Cindy, thank you so much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But
Thank you,
before,
Dr. Nick.
you're most welcome, and it's great to have you on the show. Before we walk into the future, Cindy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where did you grow up?
Right. I was born and bred in Durban, KZN, where I grew up with my mother and my brother. So we were a single parent-led household, a disciplinarian, someone who obviously all she wanted was to see us get out of the state we were in, of having very little. And she knew that the only way of getting that done was through education and grounding amazing values in us, simple values of respect, working hard, humility. Yeah, so that is basically where I grew up in Durban, and I went mainly to township schools right up to my matric before I went to university at UKZN. I know you were there sometime, but I was in Pietermaritzburg.
Right. And Cindy, can you tell us what was your dream career when you grew up?
Dr. Nick, I had the privilege of studying accounting at school and also having a flair for maths, for numbers. So I always enjoyed those two subjects and English, obviously, where I then, realized that the career that I could follow with those subjects were becoming a chartered accountant. But I must say, before I got to know about chartered accountancy, all I kept on saying to myself, because I was counting monies and numbers in my subjects in accounting, I always knew I wanted to go and work in a bank and be a bank teller. So for me, I would have succeeded if I was able to be a bank teller. That was my that's all I thought I could dream of. So I always admire people when they share their lofty dreams. For me, it was just to get out of poverty and be able to earn a living and have some financial independence and be able to look after my mother, whom I could see slogging and working hard for us. That was just my mere dreams until I got to university and discovered the chartered accountancy career.
Now, Cindy, looking back over your early days, who inspired you, or maybe what inspired you?
My mother inspired me. I saw someone who worked hard, had tenacity, had determination, very independent. And so I must be honest, that is the person who inspired me and was my role model. So I saw her wake up very early in the morning and get things done for us and teach us to be able to do with what we had. And for us to get more, we needed to go out there and work, and work at it. So for me, was my mother had very limited formal education, she actually, resembled the highest forms of, humanity and being able to live a fulfilling life.
Now, Cindy, today you're one of the most prominent leaders in the country. Looking back over your leadership career, would you say there was a turning point? Or maybe a number of turning points?
A number of turning points, indeed. When I then got that scholarship from high school that allowed me to go to university when I thought I was not going to be able to go to tertiary because I knew my mother was not going to afford it. I was clear I'm going to work and look for work in the city. So when I got that bursary, after the school principal had said the highest in the school will be able to get this bursary. I used to be in the top 3 and lurk over there, but I became very determined to say that bursary has my name on it. So that is when I learned to be intentional. And when I got that, it was a turning point. The second one, obviously, was when I attained my CA degree. that for me, it became clear that the world is my oyster. And I think at the time there were very few Black women CAs. Probably I would say I'm in the top 20 of African women CAs in the country. And that was a turning point for me. So when I then came up to Johannesburg and met role models like your Wendy Luhabe, your Clora Sirobes, that is when I started matching the role model I had in my mother with personal, grounded humanity with some professional, role models. And yeah, so for me, becoming a chartered accountant was an opening of a door that I've never looked back.
Right. And Sindi, what would you say is driving you today?
Indeed, the hunger to do better every day, the my spirituality is what keeps me going, being clear that I have to be well and healthy, mind, body, and soul. That keeps me going. The purpose of wanting to make a difference in myself first, those around me, and my country, where every day I ask myself, even in the work that I do, how is it impacting on someone else? So the formation of the African Women CAs as a network of this country that today stands on its own with the work that we have done was indeed part of that drive, part of that purpose of saying, yes, I've become a chartered accountant coming from humble beginnings, but I also was very clear of the knocks that I came across in my journey. And I said to myself, may those who come after me not go through the similar challenges if we can make the field plain for them. And so for me, that is what drives me every day, and I wake up and wanting to make a difference. And now having a family as well is something that, again, I say, in addition to wanting to make a difference professionally, nationally, but I've got a family that God has placed, in me, and it is not a mistake that I had to, be blessed with the children and the family that I have. So how do I model the leadership that I'd like to see? How do I model human beings that I also like to meet out there? So I know every day it starts with myself to say, what do I do? And every time I do something, there are kids behind me who are watching, who are not going to do what I tell them, but who are going to do as they see being done in the home. So those are the things really that drive me on a regular basis. So my husband and I will always, even when we stumble, say, oh my goodness, so the kids, what is the message that this is giving them? And we see ourselves as a partnership, and with this big responsibility of being given human beings to look after, which is children. But by the time we had them, I was fortunate that I had always had a passion of mentoring young people, both girls and boys. So by the time I had kids of my own, I always tell mentees that you guys had already tested me. I now know how to deal with teenagers. I know now how to deal with young people. So by the time my kids become teenagers, I will know how to deal with them, because I started very late. Our kids are 16 and 14. So my husband and I, we started very late.
Okay. Well, Sindi, looking into the future, and I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
It is about legacy. It is about what we leave behind, because the future is not necessarily us. The future is the young people that, again, we are, modeling. What are we role modeling? So for me, the future of leadership is the one that is conscious, conscientious, collaborates, and, looks more at how do we create as as the world, how do we create something that we live solid for those who will come behind us? So for me, the future of leadership is young, it is humane, it is selfless, it is, it is about building solidly, building right. It is about, again, as I say, it is very communal. It is saying, once I walk, I must walk and understand who I am, but at the same time is who I am within a community. So it is very much, and COVID taught us that we do not live in a cocoon, we do not live in a bubble. We live in a world where, what we do not address, one day we're going to meet and we're going to see it in front of us. So for me, the future of leadership is the one that says, how are you building in a manner that is not just about instant gratification? It is not just about being satisfied today, but it is about something that we leave behind solid and other people can build on.
Now, Cindy, what is it that we have to do to empower future leaders, to build future leaders, to encourage future leaders?
Dr. Nick, education is critical in all of its elements. Without solidly educating ourselves and developing ourselves. So when I say education, both formal, professional education is very important, but also in ensuring that we educate ourselves in self-developing and making sure that we are grounded people holistically. So for me, that is something that is very important. So every day, I commit to educating myself. I commit in making sure that I am better than who I was yesterday. So future leaders need to know that in building, not just leaders of today, but leaders of the future, is making sure that education is at the core of it. Quality and excellence in everything we do, doing things meaningfully and not just for self-satisfaction, because we're seeing a lot of that today. So for me, that is very, very important, Dr. Nick.
Thank you. Now, Cindy, these are challenging times as the world is stumbling from one crisis to the next. What is your advice for future leaders in terms of challenges? What are some of the biggest challenges future leaders should expect to encounter in their career?
Look, I guess every challenge that every leader globally is facing today is the one of sustainability. How do we, and when I talk about sustainability, it's not just climate. It is, when we talk about ESG, we tend to focus more on the on the E, and the S and the G is very muted at the moment. So the issue of sustainability is the one that says, how do we make sure that we are building sustainable communities who can self-provide, self-sustain? So these are some of the challenges where we live in a world where there are very few people who are able to afford. So the gap between the masses and a few is very, very wide. And so we need to find a way of empowering communities around us that they can be self-sustaining. We live in a world where elements of we want to buy than build, right? And even in our own country, we are now looking and realizing the importance of some of the industries that have been ignored. Industries like manufacturing, industries, artisans, artisans. We now we moved more, the pendulum swung more into maybe desktop professions. Yes, there is a big place for technology because we can do things better and faster, but in that we still need to be able to build. I come from the accounting profession where there is a lot of what we do can now be done easier through technology. You know, digitization means that we don't necessarily have to be doing the ticking of the box, but they let technology do that and then allow us to do more of the thinking and do more of how do we analyze and put mind and heart into things that are going to be a little bit more sustainable. So I do believe that the world today is also facing a lot of, I would say, revolt from masses, purely because, again, we left a lot of the communities behind. We left masses behind, and we were not inclusive in our creation. We're not inclusive in our building and sharing the in building and sharing wealth. As a result, even that those few people, the truth of the matter, we will not be able to enjoy it, because we've got people today who are now intolerant of leadership that is benefiting. We are seeing it across the continent, where now there are coups because we have focused in, internally and in ourselves, and not building for the rest of the communities. I mean, during COVID, we saw how, because we had not built strong health systems in the continent, and some of the leaders who were used to flying to Europe, because they could not fly, some of them had to succumb. So it was if we did not learn lessons during that time, I shudder, because this is when it shows us that let's build around us. Let's build health systems. Let's build educational systems. Let's build energy systems, water systems that are reliable, because now it's starting to hit us, even in cities, in suburbs, where we thought we are self-contained, we can have, first world lifestyle. Unfortunately, the system does collapse if we don't look after it holistically, because we are a network and we are interdependent, not just as a country, but as a globe. So we're seeing the migration of people into Europe, and Europe is starting to feel that years of neglect of Africa, where all that Africa was good for was just to come and take the raw materials, and not make sure that they reinvest in those systems, that when the poverty looms and is right in our faces, those few leaders who were looked after are not good enough anymore, even for Europe, even for the West. So it is important that when we build, we do not leave others behind. So the issues of ESG are coming up today, and we're working on the Sustainable Development Goals, because I think even the UN realized that this is a disaster in the making, to not realize that we are interconnected. And that is where I'm so proud of South Africa, because in the wake of democracy, when Madiba, who graciously delivered the World Cup for us, reminded us that we needed to make sure that we were peaceful in growing our nations. So in that, we had BE very early in our country. And when you unpack the BE Act, the Black Economic Empowerment, it was about SDGs. It was about ESG, because it talks about, shareholding in the economic space, in making sure that there is participation by everybody. It speaks about skills development, in that even in the economic creation, who are there, who are the leaders, who is management, and it spoke about the social development. It spoke about all those elements in the wake of democracy in 1994, in the late 1990s. And it's only in the last few years that the globe started waking up to it. So leaders like Mandela are the kind of leaders, that's the kind of leadership that we would like to see. Leaders that are selfless, that want to build peacefully, not just from a wealth point of view, is self-worth, but a self-wealth, but a self-worth. And those are the leaders we would like to see.
Thank you. Now, Cindy, as a mentor to so many future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
Wow. There's, as you say, there's so many, I wouldn't know where to start, but the ones that come to mind is Busi Sibego, a young economist whom I met when I went to speak at Duke University in North Carolina at the Africa Forum. I spoke after I had finished speaking. This young girl came to me and said to me, you know what, can I speak Zulu to you? I've been here and I haven't been speaking Zulu for a while. I see your surname and you sound like I can speak the language with you. I spoke to Busi, I think it was in the more than 10 years ago. And so when Busi graduated, she invited me to her graduation. It was such a blessing and a privilege because coincidentally, I was on a FIFA trip chairing a FIFA audit committee in Mexico. And so my stop was in the US. So I then had the honor of attending Busi's graduation at Duke. But when Busi came back to the country, Busi became an activist on how the national budgets are actually done and designed in the country. And she became a mouthpiece for young people and for women. And she worked at the Center for Economic Justice for some time. And now she actually sits in Parliament, where again, she educates and works behind the scenes in how parliamentarians can challenge the budgets. So for me, Busi Sibeko is one of those success stories, and she's just written or contributed to a book, and so she's an economic justice activist. Very
Right.
proud of Busi. And the other one is Reggie Kumalo. Is as is a young man, where through the Aspen Leadership Program, we were asked to then adopt a project. I always saw AWCA as my project, but I was stretched in doing something out of my comfort zone, out of my professional line, and I looked into the arts. Reggie was a young artist who had come to my colleague and I, asking to be supported. He was talented, but didn't know how to create a market for himself. So we had committed to create a market amongst our own networks. So Reggie, in the manner that he saw what we were doing in AWCA, started painting and saying, pieces I sell, I would like to donate them to AWCA so that AWCA can then sponsor into the bursary fund. So Reggie has been an amazing story because one day he took his bike and said, I'm going to ride across the continent from Cape Town right up to Casablanca, where at every town in the continent, I will teach young kids, and any paintings that I do, I will sell and give the money back into those communities. As a result, Reggie has been given land in Malawi and in Tanzania and in Zanzibar. Reggie now lives in Zanzibar and has built a home for himself and a studio. He now exhibits in Europe, in Paris, in London, and a beautiful story because he doesn't have parents. And in the nature of my mentoring, I usually have a motherly streak in my mentoring. And actually, Reggie for me is not just a mentee, but an adopted child. And I'm very, very proud of him because moving from that state of needing to be supported, and now being self-independent and selling, and being a sought-out artist with his work being looked out for in Europe, has been a success story. But with a spirit of giving back, because he says, Ma, you taught me to pay it forward. So the work that I do, a large element of it, I give back to communities.
Thank you. Now, Cindy, looking back over your leadership career, are there any role models of leadership that you encountered and maybe worked with that you would recommend future leaders should learn from?
As I said, and one of them is Wendy Luhabe, and purely because Wendy, as a leader, she has been very grounded in spirituality and unapologetically. So for me, seeing someone who sits on the boards of Rembrandt, sits on the board of Pepco, chairing those kind of boards, and being able to, and has got very strong family values and spiritual values. So this is someone I've looked up to, who is an international brand, and really has held my hand. And in moments where I've been weak, in moments where I myself have needed to be lifted, has played a very strong role. The other one is Philip Huckabee, who was my CEO at Ernst & Young. I went to Ernst & Young in 2005, coming out of a very difficult journey, in my career. And Philip was a leader that, for me, demonstrated belief and believing in me, and lifted me out of a moment that really I didn't know how I was going to come out again. And his hand holding, demonstration of belief in me, his very strong value system of fairness and firmness, is something that taught me to do the same for others. So when I see someone who is challenged, who is going through challenges in their career, I've always remembered what was done for me to be able to rise up and make an impact and continue with tenacity, lift my head, be proud of myself, and be proud of of who I am, and be able to know deep down myself that I'm a child of God, and my purpose I would fulfill without allowing anybody to stand on my way and try and diminish the hard work that I do. As long as I know I do the right thing all the time, that will always stand out. So I know you also a brand leadership person, Dr. Nick. And when now it is very common about how do you build your brand, where young people ask me, Cindy, how did you build your brand? I tell them that I was very, in ignorant about issues of building a brand. All I knew was to do the right thing all the time, consistently, and do it right. And be excellent in what I do, do my best, and be uncompromising in working hard and showing up. And as a result, I didn't realize that I was building a brand in that way. So today, brand Sindi Mabaso-Koyana is very much intertwined with the work I did in AWCA, the work I do in AWCA. Even today, having launched a private equity fund, it's linked to AWCA. It is about giving back. Very few private equity funds are associated with shareholders who are broad-based. And that was something that I was unapologetic about, in that we need to bring that into our private equity fund. So yeah, that is the gist of it, Dr. Nick.
Right. Now, Cindy, how can our listeners reach out to you, and where should they follow you?
I am on LinkedIn. I am not on Instagram. I think I'm on Instagram. My son made me join Instagram because when he turned 16, it was an agreement that he wants to join Instagram. He had been hounding me since he was 14.
Right.
And he said, okay, Mom, you can join and then follow me, but I'm not active on Instagram. So no, am I on Facebook? So it's only a professional social page, which is LinkedIn, Dr. Nick. Yeah.
Thank you. And last but not least, Cindy, what is your message for the millions of learners out there who are about to finish school, who are looking to start a career? What are maybe one or two success principles they should keep in mind?
Dr. Nick, for me, one of the things I see, amongst young people at the moment is, again, this thing of self gratification and instant gratification. And it is important that we know that when we build ourselves for the intention of also building others. So it is very, very important, where we are continuously learning and working hard, not want to have easy solutions, because easy solutions, as our parents used to say, in the olden days, there was a song, easy come, easy go. You know, it is important that we build right, we build for sustainability in a sustainable manner, not something that you can build and then break tomorrow. So build a very strong foundation, and that foundation can only be built when we build from inside out, where we are very firm ourselves in who we are, and be very clear about our purpose, and be very clear about our standing in society, that even when we chase careers, at the end of the day, we are human beings. Let us not chase careers at the you know, the what's the word, at the expense of society, at the expense of humanity. You know, we must be people of good standing, not just because of our qualifications, but in addition to our qualifications, we must remember that the quality of the person is the one that, after the qualification has opened the door, the quality of the person is what will make you stay and also thrive as a human being and a professional.
Sindi, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of
Thank you so
leadership.
much, Dr. Nick, for the opportunity.